Hi, I'm Valerie, and for the month of September 2020, my lifestyle experiment was to take a look at my eating strategies in general. And I feel like it's important to start with a warning and a disclaimer that I'm going to talk in terms of specific numbers because I feel like that's kind of the most authentic in terms of accountability and reality for myself. I realize that there's potential for that to be, triggering or upsetting to others. So I just want to flag that at the outset and say that if that is something that's really sensitive for you, that this might not be the video for you. I also want to give the disclaimer that I am not a doctor or a nutritionist. So I'm providing this information in this vlog based on my own personal experiences, and it's not meant to take the place of talking to your own physician or dietitian or healthcare provider. It's for entertainment and for informational purposes only. And I want to lead with that because I believe strongly that there is no wrong way to have a body, that we are all unique and individual, and how I feel about how I feel at my best may not be how you feel at your best, and so forth and so on. We are all, or the experts on ourselves, or have the opportunity to be the experts on ourselves, and that's what this whole project is about for me. This year I'm really focusing on experimenting to know myself better, and live the best life that I can, and I would encourage you to do the same. With that out of the way, as a bit of context, in January of this year, for my lifestyle experiment, I kicked off a new approach to my eating habits. I began tracking my consumption and following the strategies in the WW world, using their purple plan. And my focus was on eating foods with minimal processing, mostly, though not exclusively, plant-based, and anti-inflammatory foods. And I'll link to that video if you are interested in learning more about my experience with that. I have a whole video on it. This really came out of a realization that I was the heaviest that I had ever been. I was struggling with some inflammation-related issues, rosacea, dry eye syndrome, some pain in my joints, and honestly struggling with my mental health, depression and anxiety in particular, though I feel like who isn't given the current world conditions. But I had a lot of conflicting self-talk in my head, a real desire to love myself as I was, but also a realization that I wasn't necessarily exercising the best self-care practices that I could be. My clothes weren't fitting particularly well, and I felt pretty tired of feeling sad and tired. Though there were definitely times I struggled. The month ended with me being down around 10 pounds, and with my clothes starting to fit a smidge better, feeling more energy and motivation and less inflammation, which honestly felt like really positive, great, motivators to keep going, which I did. And though there were times again that I struggled, especially as I built up my workouts and added more strength training, there were definitely times where my Hunger felt overwhelming, and I felt like my workouts were suffering from a lack of fats, and very simply from calories, because I could definitely feel the point at which my calories kind of wore off. I kept with WW all the way until probably around August, and that's where I hit a pretty big bump in the road for myself. By early August of this year, I was down approximately 75 pounds, and two things kind of collided for me in August. I went away for a long weekend on a getaway with friends, where for the first time I seriously binged in months. I had, during those couple days, it was like I was making up for lost time eating processed, refined, fatty foods. And though I was in an environment that was very non-judgmental, I mean, the friends I was with were not judging me for my choices, I was still doing some weird stuff, like eating when I wasn't hungry, sort of hiding how much I was eating, eating in secrecy. And for anyone who has ever eaten in their car and alone and hid the evidence, I know you feel me. At the same time, the book that I had brought with me to read while I was away was Intuitive Eating. And I was zooming through it, and I'll throw a card up or a link up here for that book review if you're interested, though I'll talk more about it in just a couple of minutes here. Too, that book really was impactful for kind of what I was feeling through this. So Intuitive Eating, the edition that I read was the 4th edition. The subtitle of the book is A Revolutionary Anti-Diet Approach. It's by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, who are both registered dietitians with a bunch of other initials behind their names. And again, I'll link in the description to that book. I had heard of the book through a couple different YouTube channels that I like, including dietitian Abby Sharp's Abby's Kitchen, and I'll link to that below as well. And so I focused my September challenge after reading the book in August on sort of exploring some different diet and eating strategies, and diet from the standpoint of lifelong dietary choices, not like a short-term fix. So thinking methodologies, philosophies, whatever you want to call it. So the book is basically structured in 10 basic philosophies. So to quickly go through them, the first is to reject the diet mentality. The thought being that there is a lot of false hope presented, that you can lose weight quickly, easily, and permanently, and they're presenting that that is not the case, that system of dieting is broken. The second philosophy is to honor your hunger, so getting in tune with the biological hunger signal and honoring it with adequate energy and calories. And through doing so, they believe that you can rebuild your relationship, trust in yourself, and in food. And then the third philosophy is to make peace with food. So give yourself unconditional permission to eat, realizing that forbidding foods can lead to intense feelings of deprivation, to cravings and binging, and you really are giving food so much power over you. And it's through removing those, forbidden foods or that deprivation that you get past it. The next is to challenge the food police. So not assigning moral judgment that some foods are bad and some are good, and to give yourself nurturing messages and non-judgmental decisions about eating. The next philosophy is to discover the satisfaction factor. So eat what you really want in an environment that's inviting. Stop eating when you're comfortably full. They say if you don't love it, don't eat it. And if you love it, savor it. The next philosophy is to feel your fullness. So trust that you will give yourself the foods you desire. Know you can eat again if you're hungry, even if it's within an hour. It's still going to be there tomorrow. They encourage you to pause in the middle of eating and ask yourself how the food tastes and what your level of satiety is. And they talk again about biological hunger, but also emotional satiety that comes from eating the things that you truly want. They also talk about the next philosophy is to cope with your emotions with kindness. So recognize that food restriction, both physical and mental, mentally can trigger a loss of control, which feels pretty similar to emotional eating. And they encourage you to find ways to comfort, nurture, distract, and resolve your issues outside of food. Finally, they encourage you also to respect your body, to accept your genetic blueprint, respect your body so you can feel better about who you are, stop comparing yourself to other people, and start to respect and honor the body that you are in and what it can do. So they say that when you begin to do that, you'll begin to eat less and to take better care of yourself. They also make a focus on movement over exercise and encourage you to feel the difference when you move in ways that feel good to you. So they encourage you to focus on how you feel when you move your body, such as energized, proud, and relaxed. And to really reframe the purpose of exercise away from like losing weight or burning calories to feeling good. So I really agree with all of that. Their final philosophy is to honor your health with gentle nutrition. So they say honor your health and your taste buds while making you feel good, and encourage you to consider that you don't have to eat perfectly to be healthy. It's what you eat consistently over time that matters in the long run. One meal, one day, etc. is not going to make or break you. And they emphasize progress, not perfection. So a lot of that really resonated with me in terms of better understanding how to have a healthier relationship with food. Really, I feel like the underlying concept or precept of intuitive eating is that it's about trusting yourself and trusting your body, and knowing that your body is gonna intuitively know what you need. And if you listen to yourself, you know, your reptilian instincts, your limbic connection to your emotions, and your rational thoughts, you're gonna be able to have a more balanced relationship with food. And sort of as I was reading the book, I realized that what had really worked for me in WW, at least at the outset, was some of these intuitive eating principles, though I didn't have the vocabulary for them at that point. So particularly like the emphasis of listening to your hunger cues and really feeling when I had the impulse to eat, was it based on biological hunger? Was it boredom? Was it, what was going on? And really just eating if I was hungry, and then paying attention to my fullness. Like, when had I had enough? Did I need another serving of something, or was it almost like just habit? Also trying to cope with my emotions with kindness and not just going to food as a crutch, or allowing like sugar in particular to be the go-to for feelings I was having trouble managing was really important for me. I also found that movement ended up being a huge saving grace with balancing some of that emotional eating, distress, managing anxiety and depression. the strategies that I employed in trying to just determine what were different types of movement that I liked, and treating exercise or movement not as a way to punish myself or a way to burn calories, really was beneficial for me. As far as the WW, over time, I feel like I got a little compulsive about some of the rules. And that maybe, I'm not blaming WW, just for me, it helped me in terms of reaching for more nutritionally dense foods. For instance, having more fiber in my diet, brown rice, whole grain, pasta, beans, all were really good, but I do feel like there's a lot of emphasis on not having fats. And that for me was leading to a lack of satiety overall. Like, you keep looking for foods because you're denying yourself the things that you're craving, I guess, that your body is wanting. And I do buy into that when you are going through deprivation and saying, well, you aren't going to have these foods, that it does build up and can lead to binging. So I did want to kind of get away from allowing food, sugar wafers, you know who you are, to have this power over me. So in September, I decided to allow myself to eat what I chose. Now I'll admit that some of the underlying message that all food is equal, I can't say I agree with totally. There's a concession in Principle 10 on gentle nutrition, and I have to say, after reading the book, I'm somewhat foggy on what that means exactly. I believe it means that you can allow for some of what they call play foods, and that it'll end up at the end of your journey with more of a balance of 80% more healthful or nutritionally dense foods and 20% play foods. I don't know, honestly, if I believe that 100%. As a person who grew up with very little understanding of nutrition, and then when I went out on my own as a young adult, I swung heavily towards fast food because it was like a treat. It's not something I grew up having. And once sort of a lengthy run with IBS ended, I found myself steadily putting on weight year after year. I definitely have a predilection towards sugary foods and starch, or I did before this year. And I find I like structure. I don't do super great without some type of system or rules in place for guidance. And from my understanding of reading intuitive eating, that's kind of contraindicated. There's an assumption that you'll eventually begin to eat less through respect for your body. And maybe I just never made it that far because I'm still struggling with some of the compulsive behaviors where I feel like I vacillate between, sticking towards a more regimented way of eating and then kind of sliding way off the other side. And again, from the reading, it seems that maybe because I haven't fully told myself and am believing that I can have whatever I want, whenever I want. Anyway, so that was my experience with intuitive eating, trying that. The counterpoint to the intuitive eating is the second book that I read related to this, and that's Michael Greger's book, How Not to Diet. And it's the second kind of strategy I explored this month. So Michael Greger is an MD who has devoted his life to studying health and nutrition's impact on said health. His book was a fascinating exploration. He really keeps on top of the most recent studies and information with regard to health. He has what he calls 21 tweaks that he has compiled and makes freely accessible through his app called The Daily Dozen. And these are tips that are proven scientifically to impact weight loss. he sort of lays waste to some of the claims of IE with regard to diets not working and not actually being that important to overall health. And I have to say, his book and the studies he cites are compelling. He encourages a primarily plant-based diet, but he also encourages an approach that is, it has a focus on activity and like actions, as opposed to what not to do or what to take away. So he's focusing on additions as opposed to subtraction. He encourages you to use implementation intentions, a few at a time, and to add these tweaks to your lifestyle. So the implementation intentions essentially are saying what you're gonna do and identifying how and when you're gonna do them, how it's gonna work into your everyday schedule. So I began using his app to track in the latter portion of the month. For me, the first ones to implement and no-brainers were stay hydrated. So he encourages you to keep your urine a straw color or lighter, to time restrict your eating, so basically to eat within about a 12-hour window in the day, to fast after 7 p.m. and to get sufficient sleep, so at least 7 hours. Those were pretty easy for me. I mostly do them anyway. I worked additionally on preloading with water, so pouring and drinking a pint of water first thing when I woke up, before I eat at least a half an hour later. Incorporating a teaspoon of ginger. I just throw it in my oatmeal most mornings. Green tea. When the coffee pot is empty, I chase the cold weather away with tea. And then I weigh myself twice a day, most days. Mostly due to the weighing myself twice daily, I can say that I have done myself no great harm with exploring these new methodologies. There's a fair amount of fluctuation in my weight. I seem to pass the same 5 or 6 pounds back and forth pretty much the entirety of September. I haven't lost any weight, but I guess that's no surprise that these two strategies for health are somewhat counterindicated. I think intuitive eating might refer to this as a diet. I'm not sure. I mean, it's certainly not rejecting the idea that I have weight to lose. They say it's necessary to get rid of the scale, the measuring tape, etc. And How Not to Diet says that you should pay almost hyper attention to the scale through weighing in twice a day. IE says eat whatever, and How Not to Diet says 7 to 9 servings of vegetables and fruit a day is the ideal. Both seem doable, and both seem to, for the most part, be leaving me in a maintenance state. So I haven't lost more weight, and honestly, I'm on the fence if that should be a goal or not. I really want to think sustainability-wise. I think I could lose more through a variety of means. I'm beginning to wonder if it's sustainable to do so, and also having lost, you know, a decent amount of weight in this year, I feel like I maybe should stick in a maintenance state for a while and let my body kind of even out. Skin, if nothing else. So where did I end up? So intuitive eating, I'd say the pros for that, all the Halloween Oreos I want, if I want. Definitely less time spent tracking food, easier time eating out or sharing food with other people. I think more reflection and mindfulness, paying attention to my body's cues, all of those are really good things. Cons, I have to say I feel a little out of control without rules. And honestly, I didn't get past the point where I was still kind of binging on certain triggering foods for myself. When it comes to how not to diet, the pros for me, I really like the science-based backing for a healthier lifestyle. I like that there weren't tracking of food quantities needed. I like the approach of crowding out more junkier stuff with good stuff. The cons is that all of the tweaks in their entirety seem to be a bit unattainable, but then again, I mean, he doesn't actually recommend following all of them all of the time. He says they're aspirational, and again, he recommends picking a few at a time to tackle. My honest assessment is that I'm not sure, because I was kind of trying to implement parts of each, I'm not sure how closely I followed either one of these. Definitely not to the letter for either one. And I think what I can take with me is sort of the 80-20 approach from intuitive eating, that I can definitely allow for more flexibility in what I'm eating without losing my way. I can be kinder to my emotions and avoid using food as sort of the cure-all. And definitely, again, the mindfulness to hunger and satiety. With that said, I like the science-based nature of how not to diet, and again, the focus on plant-based healthy options is one I can get behind. And I like that the information in there gave me more knowledge to make informed decisions. And again, it still leaves the ability for play foods too, and perhaps it'll also help me with sort of my mentality that can be a little all or nothing. So I hope I gave you some food for thought, and if you have any questions or if you've done your own experiments, particularly if you've been implementing anything from intuitive eating or how not to diet in your everyday life, I'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to comment below. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, etc.